Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Good to be back with you. Kia ora, Chewy, sir. How are you?
Kia ora, Pats. I'm looking forward to this week's 90-minute Monday.
Yeah, it's gonna
batshit crazy, fucking broken. Everybody that talks is just spewing nonsense. It's great.
Yep. It's going to be a really big week, actually. I mean, I guess I could say it straight away because we've got some guests coming up later in the week. Harry Tam will be joining us live on Wednesday night. So Harry Tam, I don't know if it's infamous or famous or whatever, but the person that every right-wing party points to say bad money going by the left to gangs, Prime Minister, then opposition leader, before the election was asked several times, would you ever meet with Harry Tam? No, never would. No, never would. Why would I do that? We're going to play some clips tonight around a bit of a conversation, but it actually seems that with all this gang legislation talk at the moment, no one's talking to gangs. So no one's actually checking in with gangs. Now, some people are going to go, well, so what? Let's just legislate against them. But the reality is, and I say this all the time, we say this all the time, what you want is the most efficient legislation for the best outcome. And I don't think, as we know from Chester Burrows, who we've got a little clip from him tonight, that potentially what they're doing right now makes for a good headline, but not good legislation. So there's going to be a lot of that in the show tonight, and it will continue on through the week as well. So yeah, big week. Got a guest tonight as well, a law professor out of Auckland University, to talk about that legislation and so on and so on and so on, Chewy. So yes, there might be a few 90-minute hours this week, if I'm honest, Chewy. There might be a few.
Well, usually if it's gang related, it's and it's just a policy like, oh, we won't talk to gangs. We don't want to legitimize gangs. Like you could even distill that down into, it's know your enemy. How can you fight something you don't understand?
Yeah, I just have been thinking today, Chewy, about that story you told us last week. About how, where you lived and where you grew up, there was sort of, what do you call it when you're alongside gangs? Your gang
adjacent.
And times that you guys struggled for money, it was the gangs that turned up and gave you guys food. It's like, the way that it's talked about is nothing good, all bad, no reason for them, let's squash them. Whereas in New Zealand, it's a very different vibe. There is a reason for them. They have come out of some places in the 70s and maybe even 60s, but the 70s, and you can see reason for them, and you can see whānau going through them, and families, fathers and sons and brothers. You can see there can be a community. They can also be a criminal element, no question about that. But it's not quite the same as an international gang that just joins because they want to make money selling drugs. It's different. And I still think we want the best outcome for everyone in society. And it's a little bit like perhaps the treaty referendum. If you exclude one part of the conversation, then how can you expect whatever you're going to do and you're going to put in place to work? So
I think for everything that I've seen about gangs and everything I know about gangs, and there's a couple of excellent books that cover like the origins of the mongrel mob in New Zealand and that sort of thing. And I think when you look at the New Zealand experience, that's it. That's like, if you understand where something comes from and you understand the point it serves.
Yep.
And I think for so many people in gangs, and this is what the politicians do not talk about. They don't want to talk about this. They're just criminal gangs that do nasty stuff. And of course they are. And I don't want to diminish it, and I don't want to take away anything from the absolute misery that gangs can cause. But the reason that people are in gangs is because it is their best chance of some sort of family, tribal, or support structure. And that's what these guys know. You can't just smash someone's support structure and go, cool, we've solved that.
Yeah.
And these guys will put on a suit and tie and go and work in an office.
Yeah. Even if that support structure is wrong. Yeah, even if that support structure 9 times out of 10 does the wrong thing, or it's still it's like, you hear, and parents will know this, you hear stories about kids who kind of go off the rails because they get to a point in their life where they're not getting what they need, and they realize that any attention is better than no attention. Like that's a really common thing amongst children, young children. Any attention is better than no attention. You've got teenagers and young people who have, maybe they've lost their father to the institution of crime. Maybe he's in prison, maybe, and so they got to get some attention from somewhere, and they look to a gang, and it's like, these I'll have a family. I'll have someone who's got my back all the time. I may not have to worry about putting food on the table, and we'll watch the rugby on Saturday afternoons.
And yet, so many of these, so you got the fella in the gang, and you've got his partner on the periphery of the gang, and then you've got the kids. Dad goes away for something. Who's looking after mum and the kids? Often it's the gangs.
Yeah.
And so that's what the kids are surrounded by. So when the politicians talk about breaking that cycle, like they're talking about with the patches, right? The patches and the social media, that's what's getting their recruitment. They're fucking wrong. The kids are recruited 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
It's all their male role models are in the gang. And so unless you can replace that support structure, and unless you can give someone some other sense of self-worth, then they'll get it from the gangs. And this is what no politician has worked out, because they don't want to legitimize the gangs by talking about their positive aspects.
Yeah.
They only want to talk about the negative. And nothing is wholly positive and nothing is wholly negative. The gangs might be overwhelmingly negative, but that positive aspect that they fill in these people's lives, that's incredibly powerful. And it's something that those people are not getting anywhere else in society, because nobody wants to pay attention to them. Yep. Nobody thinks they're worth anything.
Yep.
So why would they listen to politicians? So
Associate Professor Carrie Leonetti, Auckland University, thinks that this is, I'm using the wrong word, I'm going to use the word posturing because I can't remember the exact word that she used, but basically when we had Chester Burrows on, he said pretty clearly these kinds of policies make, and remember he was a police minister who tried to implement this policy in Whanganui. He says they make for good headlines but terrible policy, terrible legislation. So we'll look at that as we go through. Also, want to let you guys know, we've talked to you a couple of times about 2024, have more information and stuff coming out about 2024 this week, and let you know what's happening and what we're looking for and what you guys can expect and what we need. And then you guys can decide whether you want to be a part of us or not. And speaking of, I want to say a big thanks to all of our patrons. If you are a patron at the moment, you may have already seen the interview that I've done with the Associate Law Professor, because it's sitting on the Patreon right now. We've had quite a big sign up over the last wee while, so many so that I've done the billboard a couple of times and it's still not up to date. So I'm going to do it again. And so let me just say straight away, Chewy, and you guys will get your proper shout out when we get the billboard done. But thanks to Southern Rose, who signed up at 4:30 this afternoon. T. Moriarty, Frith, Kay Page, Aaron Gorst, Blair, Sam Blackmore, to name a few, who have paid up, who have signed up as paid patrons. There are a bunch of others who have signed up to be free patrons. I'm not entirely sure how that works, Joey. It's my patron. I'm not entirely sure how it works. But there you go. There's some free guys there as well. This weekend, we will be doing a internet meetup for paid patrons. That'll definitely be happening this weekend. I might even set it up tonight. So if you're a paid patron and you want to do a meetup on the internet, it'll be this weekend. Now, before we go any further, it's a little bit about finances and money and that kind of stuff. But there's one thing coming out, right? We've got a new sort of brand coming out this year. And it's all sparked by the old Chewmeister asking the best question there has ever been asked in an interview on Big Hero News. Have a listen.
I just have one question. There's a lot of talk with people that watch our show and that sort of thing about what the best, what in your opinion, what's the most effective way the Pākehā can support Māori in this fight so that they don't feel like they're...
See how I'm nodding there? That's because I'm trying to get a little bit of the glory of that question. I'm trying to be a part of it. It was that good.
Doing it all by themselves.
Good question.
Oh, thank you very much for that question.
Great question.
Because it's one of the things, my Ngāti Kahu, so I'm the chair of Ngāti Kahu way up in the far north, and I've asked them what instructions that I could take to Tūranga Waiwai, and one of them was that we ask our tauiwi allies, which includes our Pākehā allies, if they could please come and help us by being a buffer between us and the Crown, and challenge the government, challenge the Crown, because if you can see what's happening to us, for heaven's sake, instead of us having to say it, because they don't listen to us, instead of us having to say it, would you please say it?
So a beautiful answer, fantastic question about being a buffer. So we're going to start a new brand along with our regular merch, and it is called, it's going to be a logo, it's going to look like that, and it's going to be called Buffer. And if you want to be a buffer, as Professor Margaret Mutu has just asked, then this week when the merch drops, you will be able to buy some buffer merch. And even though you can see right here, for people who are watching, there's a little tiny BHN, just a little thing there. We're not going to put we're not going to put BHN branding all over it. It's just a little acknowledgement there. It's really about a signal from you to people who know as to what you're about. You're basically standing up for Te Tiriti, and even though you may not be Māori, look, if you're Māori, buy it as well. I'm not saying don't. But if you're not, then it'll be a little signal to be the buffer, and people will know what it means. And so maybe tomorrow, probably by Wednesday, we'll have a new round of merch, which will go for a week and a half. And there'll be the regular merch that we sell, the BHN merch, actually that I'm wearing one of right now. There will be some new BHN merch where you can get your name on the back of your hoodie or your t-shirt. And if you're a patron, there'll be an exclusive crew t-shirt and hoodie you can buy. But only patrons will be able to buy the crew gear. Everyone else can buy the regular BHN gear and the BHN gear with names on it and the buffer gear. But if you want to be crew, then that's going to be an exclusively sold only to patrons, Chewy. So there you go. You might want to be a buffer, be the buffer. The first one's going to be, and this is going to be every month. We're going to do buffers every single month as well, but they'll be different colours. So the first one's going to be either a royal blue or a sky blue with that blue logo across the front, and then we'll change it. Each month. Each month we do a drop. So yeah, there we go. That's what we're about, Chewy, and that's all thanks to your little old question there, Chewy.
Oh, it was a good question. You could definitely see my brain working, the rusty gears sort of going. But yes, yeah. I'm quietly very proud of that question.
You can retire now. It's like you've reached your pinnacle, mate. It's all downhill from here. All right, let's get into this, shall we? Let's look at Brooke van Velden first of all, and let's have a look at her having a chat with Daniel Faitaua and also Rawiri Waititi about, and this is going to start our conversation this evening about the proposed legislation by the National-led government. And look, National will hate this, but everything that gets passed is going to be laid at the feet of National, even if it's a policy that's been brought in by Act or whatever, because it's the National-led government. So I know sometimes I talk about a National-led government or I just talk about National's legislation. It all means the same thing. Anyway, I think this might even be an Act idea. I'm not entirely sure of that. Maybe it was National. But Brooke van Velden, the gimmick, that was the word, gimmick. The professor we're coming on tonight said that it's a gimmick, this idea. So Brooke van Velden is on breakfast this morning, and she was asked if there was a gimmick to all this. Is it real legislation? Is it going to make a change, or is it just a gimmick? I just want to hear, and I'm not trying to be patronising to 31-year-olds, I'm being patronising to Brooke van Velden. Let's make that very clear straight away, who happens to be a 31-year-old. The answer that she gives, which has got zero life experience, zero understanding of what it means to be in a gang. You can see that, in Tāmaki or her electorate in St Heliers, it's never been a conversation that's happened. And even the language that she used, honestly, it sounds like a 60-year-old woman playing at what you'd say to a young person. It's quite surreal. So the question is this legislation just a gimmick?
No, not at all. What this is the coalition government saying, look, we've got to get tough on crime. There are consequences for crime, and it's not okay. You know, there are whole communities around New Zealand that are being intimidated. They're having drugs peddled on them, and there's a lot of violent crime occurring within the communities. Gangs are not okay, and we should be making measures as a government to tilt the balance back in favour of the victims, being harsher on gangs and saying to the next generation of kids in this country, it's not cool to be in a gang.
Chewy, it's not cool to be in a gang. We'll tell the next
Hey, fellow
generation.
kids,
It's
let
not
me
cool.
rap to you about gang membership.
Say nope to dope. It's not
People
cool.
think it's mad cringe.
Do you
to
think
be in a
that?
gang.
Do you think that 14-year-old boy in a Portuguese is going to watch this and go, "Oh, you know, I heard that white lady on the television this morning wearing pink saying it's not cool to be in a gang. Okay, I'm out. Sorry, friends. Sorry, dad. Sorry, uncles. I'm out." Anyway, we'll let her finish her little bit and then we'll bring Rawiri in.
On gangs and saying to the next generation of kids in this country, it's not cool to be in a gang. It's not cool to wear a gang patch. We're not wanting you to do that. Actually, when you look at people who are wearing uniforms in our society, you should be wanting to get out there and wear a uniform, like being a tradie, you know, even having a countdown uniform on, not a gang patch. So we're saying let's crack down on crime and show that there are consequences for it. But firstly, making sure that we're putting victims at the centre of our justice system.
So there you go. All you young upcoming gang members, you know, it's that, or it's go work at Countdown, because that's cool and the gang's not. This is honestly the deputy leader of the ACT Party, part of the government that's going to put through these policies, not talking to gangs and trying to pass policy to convince young, what's the name for when you got a young startup to they signed on, they're gang members but aren't gang members yet? Prospect, a young prospect. A prospect. No, a young prospect that, you know, working in Countdown, that's much cooler than being in a gang. Just like I think I wrote down the word pollyanna. Just no worldly experience to be able to deliver that. You go, Chewy.
It's just, yeah, like when her idea of put on a uniform, like she's almost there. She's almost there. That the thing that would get people away from the gangs is to give people something to give them self-respect.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but a black pack and say polo shirt is not going to do that. Like, that's where her brain went, is like, oh, you can't be a valid member of society unless you're wearing a uniform, is the most fucking bleak position I've heard. Like, it's there's just so, like, she's talking to her base. She's talking to the people that watch that program. She's not talking to these people that are gang adjacent, that are ever going to consider going into it. And that's why they'll never get this right. It's always they're talking to the people going, do you want us to be tough on crime or do you not want us to be tough on crime? And the public is always going to go, oh, no, we want the tough one. We want the tough one. That's what we want. But they're not talking to the people going, hey, we don't want you to do crime, and all we have in our arsenal is a big fucking stick. Are you going to stop? And 9 times out of 10, if someone comes at you with a stick, you go, no, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it even harder. Because you've given me no other valid option. They keep failing at this, and they keep on missing the point, and they keep on repeating it every 10 years. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
And it never works, and they never learn.
There's a couple of things, right? You're right. It's like the way you get a young person out of something that they think is cool and a way forward is to provide them something else that's better. And a Countdown uniform is not that. Yeah, I like how you say they're almost there, because that's what it is. It's finding the path out, is finding alternatives to this. What's the alternative to having a family in Timaru have to get the gang provide food for them because they don't have any? Well, that sounds like a government agency to me, not a police dog. You know,
yeah, if you turn to the government agency though, right, because you've been on job seeker X amount of time, and now you're getting sanctioned.
Yeah. Good Lord.
You know, this is the thing, is every time that they toughen something up, they make that other avenue, that other option even more viable. Because desperate people do desperate things. And they don't get it. It's all stick. There's no carrot. And it doesn't matter how often they'll coach it in nice, friendly, like we're empowering people to work. No, you're not. You're forcing them into a maze full of check boxes. Yeah. How many CVs have you sent out? How many interviews have you had? There'll be nothing there that says, hey, have you ever written a CV? You know, let's help you build your personal brand to get a job. They go into check boxes, and I know this. I've been on the receiving end of it when I was a store manager. I'd see these kids that have obviously been sent in by wins going, you got any jobs? And you go, no. And they're like, cool, can you sign my form that I asked you? Like, and that's it. That's all they have to do. They have to ask 5 people. They don't have to put in any fucking effort. Nobody's helping them. They're just forcing them to do an action.
And the other thing is how much they've failed in the past by doing moves that could have helped. For example, if they had have legalized cannabis, then that would have been a financial kick in the pants for the gangs. That would have put a big thing, but no, and it would have been a tax take, I believe, of about $500 million a year with the projections. But they all said no to it. Well, not all, but lots of them said no to it. And they've had things in the past that could have helped the situation like this, and they've said no to it. So you're in the same situation. I mean, on the AM show this morning, which we're going to watch a bit later on, you know, fair play to Lloyd Burr. He was going, but it's all of you guys. The last government said, we'll do it this way, and it didn't happen. This government saying, we'll do it this way, and it might not happen. The government before them said, we'll do it this way, and nothing has changed. And that's true. And maybe it's me thinking also of that old adage of if you do the same thing over and over and get the same result. Like, why would you? We've done this. We've been here. It doesn't work. In fact, what's going to happen is the courts are going to be filled up with challenges. And although David Seymour happily sits on television this morning going, yeah, well, they've got every right to challenge a law in the court. That's how it works. Yeah, but now what you're doing is you're going to add a huge amount of extra work for the courts that are already stretched, and they're likely to win. You know, it's like, what's we talk about the and what, and then what, and then what. What are you going to bring in? And it's different, very different also, just so before we go any further, the idea of banning gang patches in a private establishment, you can do that. This is all about in public. Because in public, you have these laws that protect you. In a private building, for example, or in a private club, you can make whatever rules you want. No shirt, no shoes, no service. No mask, no service. You're allowed to, by law, make those things. When you're sitting in the park, right, you can't say no mask, no walk into a park. No shoes, no walk into a park. Those don't go. That's the conversation when people are saying how's it going to be policed. They're the things you got to think of. Chewy, let's jump back in because let's have a listen to Rawiri's response. So, so Brooke has talked and basically said kids should do something that's cool, like work it countdown. And then Rawiri is asked, is banning gang patches the solution?
No, it's not. And so this is a gimmick. All you're going to do is drive gangs into further underground. When you've got a patch on, you understand who is who in the zoo. And who belongs to what gangs. The first thing is good luck to the minister. Good luck to the under-resourced policing fraternity that we have in Aotearoa right now. Brooke did a bit of research. Should understand that Rodney Hyde wasn't supportive of this either because it breached the human rights, the human Bill of Rights. So we've just got to start looking at the drivers of crime. We want safer communities, absolutely, and people should pay for breaking the law. But at the end of the day, we've got to start looking at the drivers of crime. Let's start looking at poverty. And the first thing we're going to do is support my bill and take your GST off Kai, because all of those things play a part in why there's deprivation and why our communities are marginalised. The government wants to introduce, Borstal type solutions, with many of our tamariki that created the gangs in the first place. So let's not return to why we're in the situation right now, and let's start looking at innovative and creative ideas about how we can start reconnecting with our communities.
There you go. So that's laid out by Rawiri, and I think one of the interesting things there is, and even though he didn't cite research, what he's saying, all those kinds of things are absolutely true. Where did the gangs stuff start from? They started from a place where people felt dispossessed. I can remember in the 1980s being at a intermediate school, and one of the most troubled kids was the son of a gang member, and he went to Borstal. I think what he said in the 60s and 70s, in the 80s as well, and he went off to Borstal, and that was like basically prison for teenagers. And then they need... in prison is where a lot of people get their gang affiliation when that happens, if they don't have one already, because they need safety, they need whānau, they need protection. Same thing in Borstal. Like you'll find a group and you'll go in with it and you'll stick with it, and then you come out of it. And remember, even Bill English called the prisons the university for crime. So if the prison's the university for crime, then Borstal is the high school for crime. And then they're affiliated for the rest of their life. So it won't do anything other than create more of the people that the national-led government is trying to get rid of, basically, Joey.
I was a difficult kid, and I was on that Borstal.
Really? I don't believe that for a second.
I absolutely was, and it was only through some very creative intervention by some, at the time, would have been referred to as hippy-dippy teachers, as opposed to the authoritarian teachers that were putting me on that pipeline, that I'm here today. I don't think I would have survived that pipeline, to be honest. And this is the thing, is like when you look at the origins of the gangs, Black Power and Mongrel Mob and that sort of thing, they tried to smash that problem at the time by being tough on gangs.
Yep.
And that's why famously now we don't have a gang problem, because it was so fucking successful. And unfortunately, I have to again refer to New Zealand's last socialist Prime Minister, Rob Muldoon. Came closer to anybody about bringing the gangs to heel, and he did it by giving them jobs, gave them government subsidized work contracts with forestry and the railroads and that sort of thing, and they're all too busy to do crimes. And that's the thing, if you like a lot of these guys, they've got their families, and we might not recognize their version of family. It might seem quite broken to us, but it's still a family. They still want to feed their kids.
Yep.
Like I've seen gang members with their kids at social events, and like if you take away the facial tats and the color of their clothing and that sort of thing, it's pretty clear that some of those guys really, really do care about their kids, because they're actual humans. You don't want to humanize the gangs, do we? Like cracking down on them will just force them to dig in like ticks. Taking away other avenues for them to feed their kids will force them into more and more risky, more and more hardcore ways of feeding their kids. And as you pointed out, we missed an opportunity to really take away one of their revenue streams, to nudge them in the right direction. Help, people, you can force people on a path, and some of them might stay, but if you force them there, most of them won't. If you include someone in a decision-making process, if you're there with them to say, see, isn't this better? Then they make up their own mind. They're more likely to stay there. There's so many old gang members that are just like, man, if I could do this over, I wouldn't have done any of this. You'd need to get those people, those old gang members, in front of the young ones and go, come on, guys, find something else. Yeah. But these guys won't find that. They won't engage with them. They won't. Any sort of speaking to them in their mind legitimizes them. Gangs don't need your legitimacy, but they might give you some knowledge to break their cycle if you listen. Yeah,
very good show. Lots of chat going on at the moment as well. Someone mentioning your last socialist president as prime minister as well. Ahmad had an unusually close relationship with the gangs of the early 80s. That's from David, and felt that if they were kept busy on subsidised work schemes such as chopping firewood, they would stay away from crime.
And it wasn't
Peter,
perfect, but it did
Peter,
some work.
Peter with the $2 super chat, thank you for that. Chewy in his shorts and beard, being a wee scallywag.
Yeah, same beard. I was just much shorter.
And then Frosty says this. I'm not sure of a guy named Alistair Barry, but I watched a documentary by a guy named Alistair Barry about the 80s neoliberal revolution, and this government echoes the rhetoric back then so badly. From Frosty, and thank you for the $5 super chat.
I'm seeing so many parallels.
Do you want to tell us what we just told me off here? Have you got time for that? Do you want to talk about what you saw on Blue Sky, or is that for another night? All sounds like we've got secrets now. Talking about the parallels. No, another day. Okay. Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll find it. But what I was going to say is what I see with parallels with this government is maybe not completely aping the national government of the 90s, but definitely a fond admiration. And I look at, I made a joke about Ruth Richardson. And it was meant as a joke, but every time I go back to it, I go, oh, it's fucking real. These guys really loved what happened in the 90s, despite the enormous damage that it did to our structures, our society throughout the 90s. It was a mean government.
Yeah.
And you could even have some justifications for that coming out of the late 80s and how broke the New Zealand government was, that they had to be mean. But now we're not, as much as this government says, oh, we've been handed a fiscal disaster and Labor did a really bad job at balancing the books. They've provided no proof to that.
Yeah.
And there's international experts that have said, if anything, New Zealand is underborrowed throughout COVID and has done a really good nobody's come out of COVID with the ideal financial position, but we've done pretty well. And when you see things like I saw on Blue Sky today of Erica Stanford talking about value for money with schools, and saying some things that are just like, if you're half listening, it kind of sounds like a good idea. Like the kids deserve good school property.
Yeah.
And for New Zealand's future and all the little kids in the school, they've got to have good school property. But then couches it with going, we need to look at alternatives that deliver better value for money in our schools. And it's those sort of things. And I guess with National's propensity to look at what has been done over in the UK. And one of the things that was done there with their school buildings is they took the school land and they sold it to developers. And then the developers would rent it back to the schools, which doesn't sound like fantastic value for money to me. So it's those sort of things. I kind of think
that would be especially bad after the first contract's up, and the school of 600 to 1,000 students then gets told the rent's going up tenfold. Where are they going to go? Their buildings are already there. It's not like they can go and find another 6 acres somewhere else to buy and rebuild. So it sounds terrible.
Like it's really clear that this government loves the the public-private partnerships, PPPs.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they don't work. Transmission Gallery is a great example of that. But yeah, it's just like, well, if you're going to farm this out to another entity, and especially a profit-making one, then that's their angle, is profit. They're extracting profit from something that shouldn't be extracted. Like, you can't turn around to a school and say, oh, it's got to be good value for money. It's a fucking school. Like, your profit units that you get out of school are you can't put on a KPI list. It's you're looking at, I mean, when you think about what's the purpose of education, you can be really cold and sort of go, well, we want good citizens and we want good workers. We want functional human beings and with open minds and stuff like that. But yeah, these guys are going, no, we're gonna ban phones, even though we don't need to. The schools could have handled that, but we're gonna do it.
Yep.
And we're seeing stories like, oh, what was that one I saw? Oh, there's some school leaders are saying that we locked down the schools too hard after COVID, and it's just like, oh my god, what? Like it's terrifying what the potential future is, and I look at what the National's doing, and I look at where the UK is, and okay, the UK has a very different circumstances. The Tory government's been in much longer. They've got a different political system that means change is very hard to happen. So I think when they go, oh, that'd be good to get going over here, they've got to do it quick because they know that they potentially have, 3 or 6 years to do it.
Yep.
Where the Tories have had 20.
Yeah, decades. Yeah. All right. We're gonna move on now. Unless there's anything else in the chat you want to get up, because we're going to head towards our next couple of stories. I've got a couple of short stories in here as well to put, because the rest of it'll just be all gang stuff, so to put in between them as well. Many of you will probably know of the internet account Libs of TikTok. The founder of that is a person called Kaya Rychik. And Kaya Rychik sat down with Taylor Lorenz, I think is the reporter's name, in the weekend and had a big, long interview. Now, both of these characters, Taylor Lorenz is also a wee bit controversial, has been accused of doxing because Taylor Lorenz wrote an article about Kaya, and in the article, like exposing who was the person behind Libs of TikTok, and in the article, it showed an image of Kaya's real estate certificate. So it identified where she worked, what her phone number, all that kind of stuff as well. So, but both of these guys have had their controversies. I think that Libs of TikTok obviously is far more controversial and more serious and more dangerous, but neither of them are squeaky clean. So why she sat down for an interview, God only knows. And you can see her T-shirt there, Chewy. That's actually a picture of Taylor Lorenz crying. So she went to the interview with Taylor Lorenz wearing a picture on a shirt of Taylor Lorenz crying. The only reason I wanted to play it, and I know most people aren't probably even slightly interested in this as a story, is sometimes what happens, especially in America where there's big money, we've been talking about big money behind things in the last couple of weeks, people strike a chord. They catch lightning in a bottle, as they sound. And the way you would have said it in the old days, which is a little bit disparaging, is they are working far beyond their station, is what older people would say. In other words, they've gone into a place where they're competing against the biggest brains or the most talented people, and they're probably a bit out of their depth. And the thing for people who don't like Libs of TikTok, which is lots of us, I thought you might want to see this, because it appears to me that Kaya Rychik is a woman of not very much intelligence. I want to play you 2 minutes of the conversation they had, and then we will move on to the next story. Have a listen.
If you eradicate transgenderism, which I believe you suggested in a post today.
No, I never suggested that.
Oh, okay. You reposted a post that was advocating for that. What would happen to the people that have already medically, socially, completely transitioned and are leading happy lives? What would happen to them? I mean, what's your plan for that? If transgenderism doesn't exist, which it seems like that's what you believe, what happens to all the people living happy lives as trans people?
Pretty easy question, yeah? That they go and live in their lives, but we oppose it from here on in. Just think about the answer. If you were smart and you wanted to push back on that answer, what you'd say versus...
Well, first of all, the whole trans it's based on a lie. You can't change your gender.
Okay, but
so they could go live their life. I mean, I can't tell someone what to do in their house.
Sounds like you do want to tell people what to do in their house.
I never said that.
So you're totally okay with people being trans, just not as long as they're in public?
No, I never said that.
So she's not saying that she wants to tell them what to do in their house, but she's also not saying it's fine with them living their lives. And that's the kind of response you'd expect to get from someone who's got money behind them, who don't want you to say it's okay to be trans, because she's already said the opposite thing twice. Now, I have no knowledge that there's money behind her who don't want her to say that, but she's already said, I would never say they can't do what they want to do behind closed doors, and I would never say they can't do what they want to do in public, or the other way around. So she's already said it twice in this conversation, but it goes on.
The whole thing is based off of a lie, and I think that this lie cannot be mainstream in our society. It's a lie.
And what harm is it causing, do you believe?
I like the truth. I like truth.
Right, but I'm saying what's the harm of people expressing their gender identity differently than you believe it to be? What harm are they causing?
Like I said, we are a nation of truth, and I seek the truth.
But I'm asking about the harm. What's the harm? You might believe it to be false, but what's
The
the
harm is that there's a lie that is very mainstream and is being embedded into every institution.
I guess I'm wondering what the material harm is. Aside from it's maybe something that you disagree with, as in your version of the truth is different than their version of the truth. What is the material harm of them living their life as a woman or man or gender that you don't agree?
Not anything that's wrong is there a material harm necessarily.
So there's no harm.
I didn't say that.
All the way through, she says it, and then when it's repeated too, I didn't say that. She says it and repeat. I didn't say that. Look, I know that there'll be some people who are like, oh, don't platform people like this. But I think when you can demonstrate to somebody that actually this is the level of skill set, intelligence, whatever behind something, it's, you know, I'm not saying don't panic, right wingers out there. I'm not getting my tinfoil hat out and saying Atlas Network, but we will say there are, you know, venture capitalists and money behind these kinds of things, especially in America, because someone strikes lightning in a bottle. It seems to have been what, you know, Joe Rogan says, oh, this is a great account, etc., etc. Yeah, I agree, Peter. And that's what happens. And I think it's actually important to highlight out when we say things about, when we see these things that carry a lot of power or a lot of sway, that account has quite a lot of sway in a certain sector of society. And that's the person behind it, Joey. That's all I want to show.
A few people in the chat asking what libs of TikTok is.
No, don't worry.
Well, no, it's, you know, when you go into a public bathroom,
yeah,
and some people don't feel the need to flush. So you look in the bowl and there's just like this 3-day-old soup of unflushed turds. Oh. That's libs of TikTok. It's not smart. It's just mean and gross. And their interview just, wow. Now I can see
that
why.
must make you feel better though, because you can just see it's just all nonsense. And it's a very well manicured, is that the right word? Feed. Like it does something where it repeats the videos like 6 days apart, and they all get regenerated through the cycle. So there is big money pushing from behind, but you know, I'm not saying sucked in doesn't matter, because it does a lot of harm. And also, as people pointed out quite often, when Tyler Lorenz was accused of doxing, one of the things that libs of TikTok likes to do is point to teachers that are talking about, you know, LGBT issues in their school and say who they are, constantly basically doxing people. Yeah, so it's just all a big ugly thing.
But before we go on to something else, I'm going to invoke my tangent card, just because you know how wound up North Americans get over the pride, like rainbow flags everywhere. Society is fucking ending. I saw an amazing story. I haven't got it to hand, but of a Canadian family, a rural Canadian family. They sold their farm and everything that they owned, and they moved to Russia because Russia isn't buying into this woke ideology, and they're a Christian nation, and they want to raise their children in freedom. And I was just watching this YouTube video about it's not going so well. Because,
of course.
Because Russia's not as free as they may have imagined. Because they put up some videos, they had some financial trouble because Russian banks want to know where the money's come from.
Because it's Russia.
Yeah. And a big chunk of the money that they got was the sale of the proceeds of their farm, but it was also donations from other like-minded people to help them get to Russia. So there's no receipts, there's no, you know, where's all this money come from? So the Russians froze their entire bank account, and so because they do everything on fucking TikTok and YouTube and that sort of thing, they went to YouTube and said, maybe Russia's not as good as we thought it was.
The criminal would love that.
And the authorities knocked on their door not long after that and said, you need to take that video down and do a new video. And I think that the latest is the father has just worked out that if he's there for I think 3 years that he is eligible for conscription.
I thought you were going to say conscription. Off to Ukraine with your sunshine. But
Yeah,
remember,
isn't that good?
remember, those Democrats, they stole the 2020 election, Trump 2024. As long as you hold on to
At
that.
At least they don't have to put up with those pesky gays.
Those pesky gays. All right.
I
Let's
bet
go back.
he's thinking about that when he's in a frozen trench looking for the invisible drones.
Yeah. Let's go back to breakfast television, shall we? Because I'll tell you something that really, we were watching David Seymour sleep last week. No, I'm just kidding. That was in my dreams. I think being interviewed by Mihi Narangi Forbes, and he said something like, just because you say the science says doesn't mean you're right. Something like that. This is becoming a repetitive kind of comment for David Seymour. He seems to be someone who is more and more starting not just to push back against research and science, but actually use it like Trump would as a slight against someone. Oh, so you believe the research, so you listened to Fauci, did you? Not one of the examples, but you'd hear that quite a bit. You believe science, eh? Okay. And it happened this morning when he basically didn't mock Chloe, but he used in a sort of derogatory term a comment to Chloe because she always cites the research. He used it like as a put down. You're getting known. I'll just play it for you. They were talking about how to solve the gang situation. It's just fascinating, and I just wonder: is he just in a little hole at the moment where this happens, or is this a new tactic to try and prove to his followers that be damned the science and research because it's not ever going to agree with us? Let's just pretend it's not there. I don't know.
For decades and decades, we've had both sides going, well, your way has failed. No, your way's failed. And it's gone back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, similar to the discussion that we're having right now.
And I think...
don't the people who pay your salaries deserve a solution that's going to work?
110%, and this was one of the core recommendations, I believe recommendation 1 or 3 out of Turuki Turuki, the Safe and Effective Justice Review. It said that we need to take this out of the day-to-day political hot potato that it is and deal to the actual evidence with
But how do you do that, though?
System. Well, we take the heat out of it and we say that we're not going to make policy on the fly and this back and forth between politicians and
with the greatest
and
of
we're going
respect,
to apply the evidence.
Is this policy on the fly, though?
Yeah. With the greatest
when you're talking about
with the greatest
gang
of respect.
patches, yeah, absolutely.
Just about
If they campaigned, this isn't policy. They campaigned on it, though.
And I'm sorry, Chloe, but just about everything you say is I'm evidence-based, you guys are all on the fly and political. I mean, that has become your slogan.
Are you saying that is a bad thing? It's a bad thing that you always go to the evidence. Pff, what? Oh my gosh, it's terrible.
With the greatest of respect, Chloe. Fuck you.
Yes, we all noticed the disrespect coming as he said it, but you always go to the evidence. It's like, so you're pushing back against this. Now you'll notice very quickly he tries to acknowledge how much they follow the evidence. He doesn't word it very well, but he then just a bit like the conversation we just saw. He just falls back onto himself. No one picks up on it, but you have a listen to what comes next.
The facts are that this government has looked into what works.
When he says the facts are, he's citing the evidence. So he's telling Chloe she's always saying it, and then he says the facts are.
Just about if they campaigned, this isn't policy. They campaigned on it, though.
And I'm sorry, Chloe, but just about everything you say is I'm evidence-based, you guys are all on the fly and political. I mean, that has become your slogan. The facts are that this government has looked into what works. It is not going to be enough to say maybe gangs are...
See, that's just not true. Yeah, no, because we know that banning gang patches doesn't work. Actually, that's what the research shows. And that's what previous iterations of this policy within New Zealand show. So if the government knows what's working, then why are they putting this horse shit out? So why don't they put out what they know is going to work? Because this is not going to work. Ridiculous.
Part of our community, and if we're just a bit kinder, then they'll start being kind back. That was the approach of the last 6 years, and it absolutely failed. We are now saying, actually, this community has some standards. We're not going to accept your behaviour, and we're going to do a lot of other things, whether it's school attendance, whether it's prison rehabilitation, in order to ensure that we deal with the other stuff that Chloe's talked about.
I'd say put your money where your mouth is.
This government is doing both of those things, and I think, frankly, I'm a little bit tired of hearing, oh, I'm evidence-based and you guys are just all rhetorical and reductive. Actually, this government is taking steps right across the policy spectrum to provide
let's look at what's happening in Australia then. Western Australia's got a ban on wearing gang insignia and patches in public. Their courts are clogged with people, with gang members going, well, actually, this is against the Bill of Rights or freedom of expression. Some of them have won, then they're getting costs back as well. Are you expecting that to happen here?
Yep, I'm sure that if you go after a group of people who are causing disruption in the society, then they will access the courts and they will vigorously contest their rights, as they have the right to do. However, it's also critical that we don't say, because they're going to push back, we'll just surrender at the first hurdle.
But what outcome do you want, Mr. Seymour? What outcome do you want with the headline gangs? Because what you're being told is the headline gangs, with the outcome that you're going to use today, is not working in Western Australia. And what the headline gangs that you're using today did not work in Whanganui. So what's the outcome you want? You already know that this is not going to work, or you don't. I don't believe they don't know, Chewy. Remember what Chester Burrows told us? Makes for a great headline and terrible legislation. I don't believe they don't know. I believe they know. So why are they telling us things that are going to work, and this government knows how to do it, whilst they're doing things that they know will not work? And if they don't know, they should not be in that position to actually be making these decisions, Chewy.
Yeah. As was mentioned, Rodney Hyde was against this last time they tried it.
Yep.
Based on freedom of association and all of that sort of stuff. So, considering ACT's position, freedom of speech and nominally a libertarian party, it's always weird when they dip into crime and punishment and then talk about, oh, everybody's got their rights. It's like, well, really? And the definition of what gang insignia could be. Are they going to crack down on Destiny Church's little motorcycle gang now?
Well, that's an interesting one, because they talk about a criminal entity. What happens if there, this is just like hypothetical, I don't know any of this information. What would happen, let's say, if there was some kind of financial laws being broken by Destiny Church? After that, are they a criminal entity? What happens to their,
What I found interesting about that criminal entity sort of thing is the language around that particular aspect of so you had to have 3 or more people in the gang. And they were talking about insignia and clothing and that sort of thing. And then it said they may be a criminal enterprise. It wasn't even a prerequisite that they were a criminal enterprise, that they may be. So, if your local bowling club has a team jacket, you might be careful about where you wear it.
Coming up very shortly, we're going to have that conversation that I had this afternoon, and one of the interesting things, I'll give you a little taster, Chewy, that the associate professor said to me this afternoon, because of course we talk about that, and the point she made was, as a white middle-aged woman wearing a T-shirt with a mongrel mob patch on it, she'd probably get left alone, because it's not so much about identifying the patch, it's about identifying the people. So the little white girl in a portakey walking down the road wearing her boyfriend's mongrel mob top or jacket, or her dad's or whatever, she'll get left alone. But the little brown boy walking with the same stuff on will not. So there's an element of this which will be not just about the patches, but about who is wearing the patches, which then goes against everything they're saying, because what they're saying is it's just about the patches, and it won't be. This has got about 90 seconds. Let's just get to the end of it.
And that is the difference. There's a whole lot of people out there who have been intimidated, who don't understand why they do everything right. They pay their taxes, they get up, they send their kids to school, and someone else plays by a different set of rules. Well, whether or not people want to contest it, whether or not it's going to be challenging to enforce, we've got a government that says, actually, we stand.
I think he's talking about that 311 families who play by a different set of rules and pay half the tax everyone else does. I think that's the I mean, surely that's what he means. Surely that's what it is.
And for you, and we're going to make sure that your values are reflected in the way this country is run for a change.
Have you met with many gang members at all, Chloe?
No.
Like to talk about policy or what they need or hear their concerns?
I haven't held the Justice portfolio for the Greens, but I have looked heavily into the evidence.
Has anyone in the Greens met with gangs?
Not that I am aware of.
Have you met with the gangs at all?
I've met with people associated with gangs. I haven't had a formal meeting with gangs, but frankly, I think we've got to be a bit more realistic about who we're talking about here. I mean, the number one reason I was told last week that men leave gangs is because they have a daughter and because they understand how gangs treat women. And it is absolutely disgusting. We have so much of this. These are nice people. If only we were a bit kinder to them, they'll be kind back. We've got to actually raise our sights in New Zealand and have some higher standards that we're not going to accept the kind of behaviour that gangs...
I mean, you're right.
Funnily enough, that was actually reflected in the Prime Minister Chief Science Advisor's report, was saying that we actually have very little evidence and data.
Otherwise known as other research.
When it comes to women's involvement in gangs. And again, this is kind of the key point. If we turn down the temperature a little bit and we bring politicians around the table on the evidence, then we do have an opportunity to move forward in a cross-partisan manner with intergenerational government commitments and actually also putting the money where the mouth is. Because part of the big problem here, Lloyd, is that successive governments have commissioned these reports, which have said this is how you get to the root of this issue, but it costs a lot of money.
I know, but that's what we've had.
We've just had,
you're right, we've had so many reports and reports and reports and reports, and we come here and we talk about it.
There you go. The last thing I want to say about this is what I find fascinating. You're talking about the Libertarian Party, Chewy. This is I think that what I'm about to say is a really important point. Maybe it's not. Maybe that's my ego. But they're talking about making legislation based on feelings. Because he said at the start of that interview, we didn't play it, that people feel intimidated. We want to stop people feeling intimidated. I don't know if any good legislation anywhere ever can be made to stop someone feeling something. It's so relative, because what if those gang patches don't make me feel intimidated? Should they be allowed? What if they make one person feel intimidated out of the 1,000 that are at that public park? I think it's really could be dangerous to go down the path of making legislations where you're banning people for what is probably likely a right of theirs, freedom of expression, based on how some people feel and what it means to be intimidated. As I say in the interview coming up, some people are intimidated by a $25,000 Rolex and a $5,000 suit that walks into their room. I'm intimidated by that. But and the answer will be, well, that's not designed to intimidate you. I don't know about that. Some people dress in a certain way to show their wealth and stuff. Absolutely. They have the biggest chair in the office. They sit up the front. Of course it's intimidation. Different kind. So if you're feeling intimidated and that's how we're going to legislate, I have a concern around that. That's me done, Joey.
This is what the government has come to the table with. They have stopped reports. They have stopped studies. They have stopped expert feedback. They've stopped things like cultural reports and stuff like that provide more information and context into the judicial system decision-making process. They've stopped all of that. We are post-facts. We are post-evidence. We were anti-expert. We are doing this on vibes, feelings, and anecdotes. Strap in. These guys aren't going to go and talk to these people. They're not going to talk to the experts, the people that have studied gangs and how they get fed, how they get their recruits, how to get people out. We've just got vibes. Because if we start talking about experts, we don't want to encourage that. We don't want to encourage people into more learning. We want people to be scared, intimidated. I've been to a rugby game once. I found the other team very intimidating. They were different colours from me. Oh, But the thing with the enforcement of this gang patching, right? I've been thinking about this a lot because we joke about what if Aunt Mavis down the road starts wearing a mongrel mob patch, or maybe the local bowling club and their team jackets down at the pub fits the criteria. Because we are going down a slippery slope of guilt by association, and we're also putting a lot of weight on the police to use their... What's the word? The word has escaped me because I'm trying to use it. To use their discretion to decide what is a gang. And I think, if you if you came from another country with absolutely no context and you saw these guys,
Yep.
what, and they go, who are these guys? This look
I
like the
recognize.
Hells
I
Angels from back
recognize
home.
that.
And
I
you
recognize
turn
that
around and
brill
you go,
cream here in the middle. The brill cream back here in the middle. I recognize.
if you turned around to that person and goes, oh, don't worry about it, it's a church group, that sounds fucking crazy. Now, they fit pretty much every visual tick box of a motorcycle gang. They've got the upper and the lower rockers. They've got the logos. They're all wearing black leather cuts and all of that sort of stuff. They're all riding Harleys, you know. So, like, if the law is going to be enforced equally and impartially, then it should catch them. But then some police are going, oh, well, they're not a real gang. Okay. So you're going after a real gang and you decide what a real gang is.
Discretion, yeah.
Right. That is a very slippery path. And as we've discussed, one of the things that the gangs can do there is they just lose the patch, start wearing colours. And now it goes, well, he was wearing a red hoodie and we know what that means. Or he had a blue bandana and we know what that means.
I think that's why they haven't said gang patches, they've said gang insignia. So they're actually going down that path with the legislation, proposed legislation.
Yeah, they're widening it. And for a party that is about, nominally about freedom, like they're going to crack down on freedom of expression, freedom of association. And they're right. Like, Western Australia's experience is exactly what they're talking about. The court system is completely jammed. People have changed how they signify where they're in the gangs, and they've disappeared to other states. They haven't solved a problem. They've created a whole bunch of new ones. And it's just, when it's all shoot from the hip, don't learn from the past, don't learn anything about what we're going after. And as I said at the start of the show, know your enemy, then you're not going to be able to solve this. You're starting a war with no exit plan and no objective. It's like the war on drugs. Okay, so how do you tell when the war on drugs is over? I will know.
Before we go as well into the paid interview, I pulled these up to use at some stage today because I think it's important. Because remember, what we're hearing from this government is about how poor the last government were and how they, were soft on crime, and like this line, they were being nice to the gangs didn't work. That was never a policy. I just want to remind us all of Operation Cobalt, which was under the Labor government. Operation Cobalt, and this was August, right? So it's for 13 months. So at the end of August, 50,396 charges have been laid against gang members and associates for offences which include violence, dishonesty, drugs and firearms offending. Police have seized 501 firearms and issued 64,000 some odd infringement offensive notices. We have seen the results from right around the country since Operation Cobalt began, says a detective superintendent, whether that has been arrests and vehicles seized in the far north, firearms seized in central Auckland suburbs, or gang members arrested moving through the South Island. Police have continued to target illegal behaviour being employed by gangs. So that's 50,300 some odd charges in 13 months. So that's nearly 4,000 charges a month. 4,000 charges a month. Crime. Soft on crime. The other thing is they arrested in that 13 months 8,000 individual members and individual gang members. And finally, just to remind you as well, when we hear about gang numbers going up, yada, 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 police cautioned that the NGL was established, this is the gang group, was for intelligence purposes and not for counting membership numbers, and explained that any increase on the list should not be seen as definitive increase in gang membership. As we said before, if you've got 500 gang members in an area, but you know of 300 of them, and then you learn of the other 200, it's not an increase of 200 new gang members. It's that 200 more have been identified. Yes, there will be some new gang members, but this whole kind of has gone up by 60% is just nonsense. It's just nonsense. 60% more have been identified. Some of them will be new. A lot, if not most of them, will be, oh, okay, this person's never been counted before. We'll count them now. So just
it's
putting
funny,
it out there.
If you look for something, you often find it. Yeah. Well, these guys just don't know what they're doing, and it is scary because it's one thing for us to analyse this over the space of an hour and talk about it for 6 months and that sort of thing. But this plays with the general public because they see news reports that says, oh, violent crime's gone up. Gang members have gone up. I didn't read the asterisks that said what you just said. It just said the crime's gone up. And if I Google it, then the bar graph goes up. So it must be true. I'm told that I'm scared, and I know that a crime happened, and all of the crime stats on the news. So it must be true, and this has worked. It's worked. It worked in the election. That people voted, and they'll just keep on repeating these lies that because they've been repeating them for decades. Labor is soft on crime. They are bad at finances. They're bad at the economy. They're bad for business. It's not bought out. But we won't dig into that. We'll just keep repeating it. We'll just, when I'm on the news and I've got a little soundbite, I want to say, Labor's fucked the economy. Labor's fucked the finance. So all of these things that we've promised that we can't deliver because we were never going to be able to deliver it. All the experts that we ignore said that.
Yeah.
Well, when the budget comes out, we turn around and go, none of these things are happening apart from tax cuts for landlords. We're definitely making sure that that's happened. But all these other things that we've said, we're slashing services. We're going to put hospitals under the thumb. We're going to sell off the schools sports field. All of this stuff is going to be Labor made us do this.
Yep. That 50,000 number, by the way, I just worked it out. That's one charge every 10 minutes for 13 months. So one charge every 10 minutes for 13 months. Every 10 minutes of the day, a charge for 13 months. I mean, what does National think would be an acceptable level of being hard on crime? 1 a second? 1 a minute? It's 1 every 10 minutes. For the whole day, for 13 months. What would they expect? So, and if you do talk about the daylight hours, it's probably 1 every 5 minutes if you cut that in half. Charge. So anyway, so Chewy, I've got an interview coming up now with Associate Professor Carrie Leonetti from Auckland University. You're going to shoot off, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I will play this out, and I'll still be here in the studio team. So if there are any comments that want to go up, we'll still try and put them up. But for now, we can all say goodbye to Chewy. Bye, Chewy.
No, nice.
And we'll probably catch you tomorrow night. Remember, speaking of all this, them telling us that neither ACT nor the Greens had talked at all to the gangs. We will have some pretty good insight into that conversation on Wednesday night here live at 9 o'clock with Harry Tam. Harry Tam's joining us. I think that'll be one of those moments we'll just sit back and go, can you explain this to us? Because we don't really get it so much. Well, I don't. So that'll be Wednesday night. Anything else, Chewy, before we shoot off?
No, that's everything for me. Thanks, chat. You've been great tonight, and I will see you tomorrow.
Man. All right, Tim. See you later. We'll catch you. So this conversation is based around one news article over the weekend. Carrie Leonetti, Associate Professor Carrie Leonetti, she got, as what happens with television news, she was asked to contribute to this news story, and they put her on screen for about 12 seconds. So I thought, maybe we should have a chat and dive a bit deeper into what the research says and what it's all about, the situation with this proposed law coming in from National. So this is about 18 minutes, I think, something like that. I will see you at the end of it and enjoy the conversation I had with the Associate Professor. From the University of Auckland School of Law, Associate Professor Carrie Leonetti. Carrie is an associate professor and an internationally recognised expert on the intersection of science and the law. Her research focuses on many things, but two of the more interesting ones for us today is miscarriages of justice and scientific evidence. Welcome to the show, Carrie.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on and having a chat about this. I guess technically it's proposed legislation because it hasn't gone through yet, but what the national-led government wants to do. The proposed legislation for what we are colloquially calling the banning of gang patches, is akin to quite a controversial law based in Western Australia. Could you unpack the similarities and how this works itself out in Western Australia?
Sure. As I understand the proposed legislation, and we don't have language here yet, it will do three things. It will prohibit the sort of public display of gang insignia. It will allow courts to issue these sort of anti-consorting orders that ban gang members from being around each other for 7 days. And it will allow police to issue dispersal orders on the spot to order gang members who are together to disperse. And those are the same three characteristics that the Western Australia law has.
The other one it does here is it says that they're going, and I like they've used the word in the press conference yesterday, ensure, quite a lot. This will ensure. I'm like, that's pretty confident to say this is 100% absolutely going to do this. Like one of the things is banning gang members from communicating with each other. I'm not sure if this government understands what Gmail is or cell phones, but that's what they say they're going to ensure happens. But that's a part of this one as well, isn't it?
Or social media. So this has been one of the things they've struggled with in implementation in Western Australia is, so I'm a member of a gang and I post a Facebook picture of me and another person with gang insignia. That presumably violates the anti-insignia part of the law. And so the sheer logistics of trying to police consorting and displaying insignia online, I think is formidable.
Yeah, and look, probably just enforcing it, not even online, but in general. I have a piece lined up that I thought might come up a little bit later in the conversation, but we might as well bring it up right now. Last year, we had a conversation with Chester Burrows, who's the former National Party Minister for Police, and he was a part of the Whanganui desire to ban gang patches. And he made a comment last year about purely the policing of, the banning of gang patches. And this is what he had to say.
The problem you've got with that stuff is, how the hell do you police it? If you've got 250 gang members riding down the southern motorway on the, on a tangi of one of their dearly departed, and they're all got their gang patches on, are the police going to block the motorway and take their patches off them and confiscate them for a period of time and arrest them all and charge them and put them before the courts and meanwhile hold up 50,000 other commuters trying to get home? And the answer is probably not. And the problem there is the proponents of the legislation have created an expectation amongst the public that they will. So then there's an uproar that they didn't do what they said they were going to do, and they've got the powers to do it, but they didn't do it, and the police cowards, why didn't they do it? All of that sort of stuff. And pretty much everyone just gets pissed off, don't want to do it. They just, the police aren't happy because they don't want to spend their time doing something as ridiculous as confiscating gang patches. The public aren't happy because they expected a level of service which they're not getting. The proponents of the legislation aren't happy because, they didn't do what the law says they can do. So where do you end up?
So that was Chester Burrows last year kind of spelling out that the physical policing of it as well. He also went on in that conversation to talk about, and I guess he was referencing what happened in Whanganui, that it doesn't make good legislation, but it does make a good headline. Do you get the sense that this is similar to that? It's good fodder and it's good, tough on crime, but the legislation's actually harder to bring together?
It may even be counterproductive. So the chief science advisor for Aotearoa New Zealand did an extensive evidence-based report last year on how to sort of decrease gang membership and minimize gang-related harm. And it actually reached the opposite conclusion of this. It concluded that we need to treat gang membership and gang-related crime as a public health issue. Think about why people join gangs, why gangs behave the way they do. It's often through processes of marginalization. And that these sort of tough on crime policies, they make great sound bites, but they may actually make worse these processes of marginalization, rebellion against authority, all the things that sort of attract people into gangs. In Western Australia, a lot of the gangs have engaged in these rather public, almost farcical, satirical protests against this law. So now they make gang patches that actually mock politicians in Western Australia. And they've had hundreds of arrests around this, and it's become a matter of public protest. And so I'm concerned this turns out to be a recruiting tool for gangs. See, we are being singled out. We are being oppressed. The government is ridiculous. They're cracking down on us. That's a concern that I have. I'd also go farther than just worrying about the police not using the power. When you give police sweeping powers and they choose when to use it and when not to use it, they may choose arbitrarily or discriminatorily. So whether they do round up those people going down the highway may depend on which gang or what the patch is. I mean, I'm just really concerned that they're going to pick and choose who they use this law against in ways that might not be random. They might be discriminatory. And that's going to then drive, I think, a lot of how the gangs feel, right? Gangs tend to be located in communities that are already marginalized and already feel cut off from resources, cut off from authorities. And so then when they're singled out and targeted for selective enforcement, again, it just drives more into that narrative.
Chester Burrows was talking about, the enforcing of it and how do they do it. And he used the example of 250, motorbikes going down Auckland's southern motorway. Of course, this question was asked of Mr. Luxon pre-election. It was asked, what would you do if there was a gang tangi or a funeral? And he basically said, well, the police officers would go in and get them. And I'm like, what? You're going to put these police officers in harm's way to 300 or whatever the number is gang members. Do you think that's really going to happen? And the other thing I found fascinating is actually, and in fact, it happened this morning as well. I watched the AM show with Chloe Swarbrick and with David Seymour, and no one's talked to the gangs yet. Famously, before the election last year, every time that Christopher Luxon was asked, would you talk to Harry Tam, he said absolutely not. So ironically, so people know this, we've got Harry Tam coming on this show on Wednesday night live at 9 o'clock. But no one's talking to the gangs, and they're setting out, as Chester Burrows said, this expectation that if there's 250 gang members there, the police are going to go in and sort it out. We all know that's never going to happen, but then it's going to be you didn't stick to what you said you would, or it's going to be you'll put police in incredibly dangerous harm's way. I don't see how this can work.
And it's a resource issue. Our police are pretty under-resourced in Aotearoa, New Zealand to begin with. So if you have 5 gang members somewhere actually committing serious crimes and you've got 200 gang members at a funeral, I want the police to go to the harm incident. I don't want them to go to the gathering, the consorting incident. I also just want to point out, when we talk about patches, we're not just talking about patches on jackets. At least in Western Australia, they're talking about tattoos. And there have been these really kind of, I think, ridiculous public statements of, well, what is somebody with a gang affiliated or a gang related tattoo, let's say on their neck or face, supposed to do? And they've said, put on makeup, wear a balaclava, or don't leave your house, right? So, I mean, even that, and it'll be interesting to see how they define gang insignia, because a lot of gang symbols are subtle. They're colors, they're a type of clothing, they're a tattoo. They're not necessarily a patch that says, I am a member of the mongrel mob. And again, I mean, that just expands even more what it is they're going to be asked to police and make decisions about what to enforce or not.
Yeah, I mean, last week we had an example of an auto part manufacturer somewhere in Canterbury with a swastika out the front of their shop. Now, I'm not sure. I think it might be the mongrel mob who incorporate the swastika as a part of their insignia. So, I mean, I think it's pretty revolting that auto shop had a swastika, but that's now a gang insignia. So if they'd have to take that down. The auto shop, which is nothing associated with gangs whatsoever. The other thing is and it was mentioned with our chat in Chester, and I'm sure it's going to come up for the next year, identifying gang members. I mean, if you've got 3 gang members who are, let's have a stereotype, selling meth, selling pee, and now they're out there just in their leather jackets with no insignia on it, doesn't that make it harder to find them and identify them? Okay, so all small town police officers know the gang members. So if they go from Whanganui down to Wellington for a weekend, are they now actually, because of the government mandate, and I know this government hates that word in other cases, but in this case it's okay, because of the government mandate, they're actually blending in more and harder to find?
Yeah, it did. I mean, that actually struck me too, that gang insignia are probably helpful to the gang officers, because you're hanging a sign out saying, I am a member of this crew. Yeah. I mean, and it's a mixed bag. There is an intimidation factor to everybody knowing they're a member of that crew. But yeah, I mean, if it worked, then the gang members would go out without the insignia. And then it would be harder to issue a dispersal order. How would you defend a dispersal order if they're not wearing the gang insignia anymore? I mean, so I think a lot of the practical implications of this don't seem to have been very thought through.
Yeah, no, like, so if there's 15 big burly blokes all hanging out together in just hoodies, are they a rugby team? who are come down from the other town to play, or are they gang members? You know, the other thing I'm really keen on, and your expertise here in the law, I'd like to know about this. Mr. Seymour said this morning that a bunch of this is about the feelings of intimidation. And I just thought, gosh, are we really going to pass legislation based on people's feelings? And isn't intimidation quite relative? There are some people who see like a $5,000 suit as quite intimidating. You know, like quite intimidated by this person wearing a Rolex and a $5,000 suit. But he was saying this morning that he was, I'm paraphrasing, but he supports the ban because what this does is it intimidates people, and they feel intimidated. And I'm just like, okay, not to say give the gangs carte blanche, but if we start building legislation based on feelings and based on feelings of intimidation, where can that go?
And feelings of intimidation are not unrelated to ethnicity, nor is gang membership unrelated to ethnicity. I mean, especially if you strip insignia off. So now I've got 15 Tane Maori standing somewhere. So am I going to decide they're a gang because of their ethnicity, because they're not going to have the patches on anymore? I mean, there's no doubt the conduct can be really intimidating. I would think that draws police attention. So anybody who's been roared by one of those motorcycle convoys knows, like, sure, that is intimidating, but there are also a bunch of laws that already violates, right? I mean, you can't drive recklessly, you can't speed, you can't have noise violations. I mean, so the conduct is intimidating, but I get nervous about talking about people or a bunch of people together being a form of intimidation, and pretending that gang membership is not almost entirely ethnically prescribed.
Yeah, but then, and the question I guess I was asking badly is, how do you legislate against people's feelings? Because feelings are relative. People feel whatever, whenever. How and why can you pass legislation into law because someone feels a certain way?
I mean, to be fair, as I understand the legislation, what they're going to legislate is the insignia, a bunch of people in the insignia in one place. So the purpose is that feels intimidating to people. And probably one of the purposes of gang insignia is to do that, is to project that sense of power. I don't think they'll just ban things that make people intimidated. Hopefully they're going to ban specific actions that tend to make people feel intimidated. But there is this bit of a, you haven't done it yet, you just look menacing aspect to this that I worry about. I worry about freedom of movement, freedom of association, freedom of expression. I mean, especially when you start talking about tattoos or you start talking about less obvious types of gang insignia. I mean, it might be an indication that you're a member of a criminal organization, but it might be a political statement. It might be an ideological statement. You might be gathering together. And if there were real evidence of efficacy, it would be a more difficult conversation to me about how much we can restrict people's association rights and their expression rights if it would work. But in the absence of any evidence of efficacy, I mean, the idea that the police can say to people, you have to go home, or you can't hang out with these people, a court could say that. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, our gangs actually tend to have much more of a familial aspect. It's much more common here for siblings or fathers and sons to join the same gang. That's not necessarily true in a lot of other parts of the world. And so even that, I mean, I'm thinking a 7-day no contact order in a gang that has fathers and sons in it. I mean, that's a significant restriction of people's association. And again, if it were effective, if there were evidence that said that, like in Western Australia, they've seen a plummet in their gang-related violence or something, then maybe we talk about when free societies can restrict those things. But with no evidence it'll be effective, I mean, I think there's a huge cost there that has to be weighed against my, at least, skepticism that this is going to have any impact on gang-related harm.
And of course, there's that question that's always going to come around, what is gang insignia? Like, what is sort of what you're saying now? Is it a political statement or not? And we've been thinking here for a long time, Carrie, is that like, and I'm sure they wouldn't do this because I know there's a reason to earn your gang patch. But if one of the gangs decided to turn their patch into a piece of merchandise and make it available for anyone to sell, like, then what? And I'm not suggesting they should do that. And if you're not a part of the gang, I'm not suggesting you wear their patches. Who knows what could happen? But I'm saying if one of them wanted to push back by saying, well, let's just sell it to anyone online now, so anyone could buy it, does that therefore mean that patch, it's now on someone's back down at the beach in the weekend, becomes a gang patch or a piece of merchandise? It just seems, when you can find a way out of the legislation so easily, it doesn't feel like good legislation.
And I mean, this is a bit of an analogy. So, I mean, I grew up as a kid in the United States in the 1980s, and a lot of our sort of original gang insignia laws banned colors. You can't wear all red, all blue, or all yellow because those the three predominant street gangs back then. But as a little white girl skipping down the street dressed all in blue, nobody busted me for being a Crip, right? And that's what, so it's a similar point, right? It's not going to be things associated with gangs. It's going to be things associated with gangs on people associated with gangs. Right. And I'm worried that it's the people associated with gangs that drive the may drive the enforcement.
So you're saying the little white girl in a Portuguese is probably going to be left alone, but the teenage brown boy is going to be landed on.
Yeah, if I ironically bought, I mean, again, I'm not, this is something I probably do, but if I ironically bought a t-shirt with a gang insignia, maybe because I want to stick it to the government about restricting freedom of expression, I'm probably not. I highly doubt I mean, a middle-aged white law professor, I'm not going to get busted for ironically wearing a Mongrel Mob t-shirt at a protest. I agree. It may not, I'm guessing the Mongrel Mob would prefer I not do that, but maybe they wouldn't. I mean, it may very well be that this triggers allied free expression movements. And yeah, I mean, because again, a lot of what you've seen in Western Australia is just, I think it's becoming farcical. These on these sort of public battles between these gangs mocking the law and the government then cracking down on insignia-related mocking of the law. You could see a broader set of people going, I don't really like gang-related violence, but I empathize with somebody being busted for wearing a jacket.
But this is the whole thing, and you said you grew up in America. This American understanding of free speech, which is I hate what you're saying, I despise what you're saying, but I protect your right to say it. And it kind of feels like there's a parallel to, I don't vibe on your gang patch and what it represents, but, freedom of expression, I support your right to wear it sort of thing. It's like there's that whole conversation to be had as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, just because something is expression doesn't mean it should never be able to be restricted. But I personally see political aspects. So a lot of people sort of affiliate with gangs when they're incarcerated in prison, right? I mean, that's an entry point into gangs, and they become a protest against their incarceration. So to me, look, I mean, I'm a woman, and a lot of these gangs affiliate with things like violence against women. So it's not like I think just because it's expression, we have to protect it. But I think it's more complicated than this. I think a lot of, for instance, Maori and Pacifica gangs have kind of anti-colonial ideologies. They may also have other really destructive and antisocial ideologies, but I get worried about cracking all that down. I think it's important to say not all gang members are criminals. Not all gang members commit crimes. I mean, while gangs collectively are associated with crimes, people join crimes who don't commit, people join gangs who don't commit crimes. And then that person's wearing the patch might mean something else. We've seen older gang members really working to kind of rehabilitate the gangs. I don't know if it's real or a public relations stunt, but if it's real, if they're working to change what those gangs mean, then that expression, that to me takes on a different level of value, one that we start, so this isn't like Nazis have a right to protest in the streets, freedom of expression, at least to me. These are complicated relationships, complicated affiliations, and there may be a value to somebody, saying, I identify with this marginalized community. I come from this marginalized community. The state took away my dad, so I joined a gang to replace my dad. I'm not sure I think that's valueless expression.
Yeah. Ironically, about the right for Nazis to march, of course, that famous case in Skokie in the 1960s, I think. I've spoken to the professor who actually took that case. We did a podcast with them, so they allowed it to happen. Hey, finally, you mentioned the words allied before, like, if someone was going to be an ally for the freedom of expression. Then the next step up from that is, and you talk about growing up in America, you saw with the Rodney King situation, the Crips and the Bloods coming together. There's famous pictures of their do-rags being tied together. So what are they going to do when 1,000 mongrel mob and Black Power and killer bees and headhunters, whatever they're called, all come together and head down to Wellington for a bit of a hangi on the front lawn of Parliament? Then what? They'll just be called out for not being able to handle it, and nothing will happen, and everyone will look, the government trying to be hard on crime will look incredibly foolish.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a political protest. I mean, and then that's the kind of, I feel like, is that we want them to focus on gangs that are engaged. We want to give them something to protest against and then focus on gangs that are engaged in political protest. Or do we actually just want them busting meth labs? I mean, I just want them busting meth labs. Yeah. And I actually don't care what's on the person's jacket.
Yeah. From University of Auckland, that's Carrie Leonetti joining us this afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciated your insights. It was very useful.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
Yo, there you go. That was the conversation. I've been watching the text go through, and yes, I appreciate the conversation. It's going to be a conversation that goes on for this year. The thing that's been fascinating is the number of legislative changes that they're proposing that are controversial, like the treaty referendum, for example, that they're talking about 12 months. So these conversations are going on for a while. And we're going to keep you informed as we go on. That's about it for us for tonight. Thank you. You all enjoyed it. Now, some people are saying, I think I just saw Kiwi Skirt saying, great interview for a second time. That's because Kiwi Skirt is a patron. And if you become a patron, then you get early access to early conversations. So people who are patrons have got that there from this afternoon. There are some more plans coming out for patronage. As I said earlier today, we've got some merch dropping this week. We've got some new ability for you guys to get merch, some new kinds of merch, the stuff that I'm wearing now, but we're going to have you guys be able to have your names and stuff on the back. And there's going to be an exclusive crew t-shirt, either t-shirt or hoodie, and that will be only available to paid patrons. So if you want to be a part of that, patreon.com/Big Hairy News. You can see that was the whole show, the Atlas Network show, which I think was put up on like the Tuesday or Wednesday, and it went live on the Thursday, so you get early access. There's other things as well, like there's going to be a meetup this weekend. Also, just a reminder, I'd be interested to hear what you guys think about this. Feel free to let us know. This is going to be a new branded set of merch that we're having this year, all based around Professor Margaret Mutu telling people who are non-Māori that the best thing we can do to help with the messaging and with the fight is to be a buffer between Māori and the government. And so we just thought, you want to be a buffer? Then let's bring out some buffer merch. There'll be buffer merch every single... Colt has made a very good point. Aren't we becoming a gang? Yeah, I guess we are. Are we a criminal entity though? Shh, don't tell anyone. So the buffer gear will be coming out alongside the BHN gear. It'll come out every single month, and there'll be different colours basically every month. The first month is either going to be they call it pale sky, or a royal blue with that blue logo across the front of it. As I said, we really want to kind of push this more about the message than us. And yes, there is a little tiny BHN there down in the bottom of the U, but I think what we're going to be doing is using it as a bit of a wink and a bit of a nod. See someone out there in the street, wink, wink, nod, nod, say no more, wearing their buffer hoodie. For most people, it'll just look like a bit of a cool hoodie or a t-shirt. For those of us who know, you'll know exactly what they're doing. It's someone saying, "I will be a buffer." But it doesn't mean if you're Māori you can't buy it as well. But that's the origins behind it. So I think that you will. I'm sure you'll get into it. You'll enjoy that. Just speaking to my printer at the moment, and it'll either be up tomorrow or probably pretty much by Wednesday night. And yes, remember Harry Tam with us. I know there's this rule in radio that you're not supposed to announce who the guests are that are coming up, because as soon as you announce them, Murphy's Law says they won't be there. But I spoke to Harry today. He watches sometimes, so if you're watching Harry, kia ora. And we've organised to have him here on Wednesday night. So there's that. I'll put a few other requests out there. Funnily enough, I put a request out to Brooke van Velden last week, heard nothing back. Strange one. They also put a request out today to Chloe. In the conversation we just watched them with this morning, Chloe was saying, I know we can't delve into the details of it in breakfast television. And I'm like, well, we can delve into the details of it on a podcast that has no restrictions whatsoever. Why don't you come on this week? I don't know. We'll see what happens. All right, guys. Love you to bits. Thank you for being with us tonight. Chewy, you better not be watching. You should be in bed now. Chewy wasn't feeling 100%. That's why we shoot him off. You better get to bed. Hope you're in bed and sleeping well. And other than that, we will see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Stay safe, be well, and remember, come back tomorrow night and bring a friend. Hooroo.